So yesterday we had covered the introduction to Java. So we went through some of the concepts and we went through some of the basic programming constructs where we saw how compilation and interpretation happens. And also we saw some of the features of Java, some like uh, how it is platform independent and some of the features of Java, and also like we discussed a bit on like path and class path variables. And I showed you some basic Java program. So those were like very simple Java programs. And we'll begin with some other terminologies with Java, which are like important, which are like the basic fundamentals of Java, which sometimes you might be asked in some kind of like interview questions as well. Those are like very basic, but sometimes people tend to ask those questions in the interviews. So I think we already discussed about this bytecode, but let's go through it once more with these terminologies. So what exactly is bytecode? So when we basically compile a Java program, a dot class file is generated. I showed you that class file, right, yesterday. So when we either run that program or like use that command java c space class name dot java, the program gets compiled and a dot class file is generated. So that is like a decompiled bytecode file, and that bytecode basically is used by the JVM, that is like Java Virtual Machine, to interpret that bytecode and get your output. So basically, what happens is like after compilation, your bytecode is generated, and that bytecode is basically interpreted or like translated by the JVM or the Java Virtual Machine. So that is the mechanism how your entire program execution happens. Compilation leads to bytecode generation, and then the bytecode basically gets interpreted by the Java virtual machine. Interpretation is basically like translation from that bytecode to uh, the translation of the bytecode is taken care by this Java virtual machine. So next terminology is this class file. So this class file is basically like the structured collection of the bytecode. If you can see this, let me open my editor, IntelliJ editor. So yesterday we saw this class, employee class, right? So again, if I go to this location of SRC, and currently I am in com Java. I will tell you like how I created this com.java.training and what exactly the structure is. But let me first show you the compilation process. So this is how we used to compile the program. Means this is like using the command line approach. So you can see that as soon as like I and ran this command java c employee.java, a dot class file is generated. If I click on this file, you can see decompiled dot class file, and this is bytecode version 52.java. So this is a decompiled bytecode version, and this basically is a form of like a bytecode which basically gets interpreted by your JVM, or that is like a Java virtual machine. So this is the dot class file we were talking about. Let's go to another terminology, that is JVM. So JVM is also called like Java Virtual Machine. So Java Virtual Machine's basic uh, functionality is like interpreting the bytecode, and it gets executed from the platform. So there are like different operating systems, be it like Windows, be it like Mac OS or Unix operating system. So every operating system has a JVM. So if you if someone asks you, is Java platform independent? The answer is yes. And if someone asks you, is JVM platform independent? The answer is no. So each operating system has its own JVM. So Java is platform independent, but JVM is platform dependent. So basically, each operating system will have its own Java virtual machine. And uh, this Java virtual machine basically, hello, is there anyone saying anything? Okay. Yeah. So basically, your Java virtual machine will be specific to each operating system. Suppose Windows has its own JVM, Mac OS has its own JVM, Unix operating system has its own JVM. So JVM is like platform independent. And if someone asks you like, is Java program platform independent? The answer is yes. So sometimes the interviewer might ask you, will try to like confuse you with these terminologies, whether uh, how Java is platform independent and how JVM is like platform dependent, or they will just ask you, is JVM platform independent or is it like dependent? Is Java platform independent and or is it like dependent? So the answer would be like Java is platform independent. Why? Because when the compilation process takes place, the bytecode which gets generated, that can be basically run in any of the operating systems. Now, each operating system has its own JVM. So that JVM is like specific to the operating system, but it will be able to like interpret or translate that um, bytecode in that particular operating system and execute your program. So that is the entire mechanism of JVM, how the program execution works. Right from writing your program, compilation process happens, and then the bytecode gets generated, and then it is like interpreted by your Java virtual machine in any of the operating systems. So this is the mechanism of like execution of a Java program. Next terminology is like JIT. So JIT is kind of like a compiler. This is kind of Java compiler. We basically called it as like just-in-time compiler. So how just-in-time compiler basically helps us is like it mm, it tries to like improve the execution process. So when we run the program, so basically it tries to like minimize your execution time, and it helps you run your program faster. So that is basically the role of just-in-time compiler. So whatever so sometimes your code might need repeated translations. So what it does is like it helps in like avoiding that repeated translation, and whatever repeated translations would be required, it just runs it once, and that is how it makes the execution faster. So that is basically the role of just-in-time compiler. Now, next terminology is JRE. JRE is basically like Java runtime environment. So in the first class, we saw that we downloaded JDK, and then we installed the JDK, we set up the class path, we set up the path, and then we also set up Java home and all those uh, processes we followed. So those were some can someone please mute themselves? Yeah. Yeah. So if someone asks you, is JRE enough to run your Java programs, or would you require JDK as well? So Java runtime environment is basically a kind of environment provided to your operating system to run your Java programs. So the answer is yes. With only Java runtime environment or JRE, you can like run your program. You don't need even JDK. But why do you basically need JDK? Is like JDK helps you to basically develop your code as well. It helps you in like writing your programs. It helps you in the compilation processes. It helps you in basically like getting the libraries or imports. All those development related activities is basically carried out using that JDK. So we'll come to that. But Java runtime environment is basically it will allow you to run the applications whatever is written in Java. So it's basically an implementation of that JVM which helps you run your Java programs. So JRE is basically like JVM plus your Java class library. So let's get to some other terminologies as well. I think we have like already discussed certain things about these terminologies, and you might have become familiar with these terms as of now. Like we are already like talking about this JDK, Java C compiler, and Java.exe from like first class. But let me like iterate this once more. So what basically JDK is? JDK is like Java Development Kit, and it is basically a development environment for building your applications in Java programming language. So JDK includes your JRE as well. So it provides your development environment, whatever you require to develop your code, and it provides that runtime environment as well. So if you remember, when you downloaded JDK, so JRE comes along with that. So you don't need to download or install JRE explicitly. This JRE comes along with JDK. So if you remember, you did not perform any operation for or you did not follow any steps for downloading and installing JRE. You just downloaded JDK, right? So JDK basically includes your Java runtime environment as well as your development environment. So that is basically uh, what JDK is. Now, what is this .jar files? So .jar files is basically a kind of packaging mechanism. So sometimes when you create your project, you might create lot of modules, and those lot of modules might need some kind of like packaging. So I will talk about this packaging later in detail, but let's talk about like what basically this packaging is. It will basically package your modules into some kind of like .jar file, .var file, or .ear file. So .jar file is like one kind of like a packaging structure. So if you see this source folder, if you see this batch h1, so what you can basically do is like you can package all your source folders, whatever files are there, whatever folders or directories are inside the source folder into a .jar file. We'll see how these packages are created. We'll see how these modules are created. But this packaging basically helps you in like creating a jar or war file, which can be basically exported and basically like executed on other platforms as well. So sometimes you might be asked to send your project to some other teams, or someone might require you. What you can basically do is like you can just package your program into a single jar file and then export it. So I'll show you how those export and import of jar also takes place. But this is like the packaging, one of the packaging mechanisms of your source modules. And by packages, what I mean is like when I right click on this, you might see certain options like new package. So package is basically kind of like providing a modular structure to your project. So when I write like com dot java dot training dot demo, so when I click enter, you basically can see a new package is getting created over here. So in this package, suppose I want to create some classes. So why basically we create packages? Like if I have created one introduction package, I want like all the related files or folders or subfolders to be inside this particular package. So basically, this package will include all the related files and folders, and it will create a modular structure. So that's the role of package. We'll study about packages in great detail in the subsequent classes, but on a high level, this is what package is. uh, Package is. So package will basically help you to like modularize your code. All the related files, folders, and subfolders would be packaged into a single folder. Okay. So so jar is like one kind of packaging mechanisms. There are like other packaging mechanisms as well, like war files. There are like EAR files. So there are like tar files, but we'll come to those packaging mechanisms later. As and when we like develop those Spring Boot projects, we will see like how uh, project is getting packaged into .war files or .jar files, whatever is our requirement. The next terminology is Java C.exe. So Java C.exe is basically the compiler for Java programs. We have already used these Java C commands to show how the compilation happens. So this is basically the compiler for Java programs. If you go and open your program files and navigate to Java and then go all the way to the bin folder, you will see a Java C.exe application is already there. So that application basically helps you in compiling your Java programs. And then you will also see a java.exe in that bin folder. And this java.exe is basically the runtime launcher for your application. So it basically helps in like running your program after the compilation of your program is successfully done. So once the compilation is done and there are no errors, your .class file is generated. So java.exe will be basically helping you to like uh, run your application. So these are some of the terminologies, some of the basic terminologies related to Java. We'll cover more and more as we go on in the subsequent classes, but these terminologies are some of the basic terminologies and might be asked in some of the interview questions as well. But these are like important ones. Bytecode, class file, JVM, what is like the difference between GRE and JDK. You might make a note of this if you want to, like what is the difference between GRE, JDK, JVM, and JIT. This is one of the interview questions as well. GRE, JDK, JIT, and JDK. So this is one of the interview questions. You can like make a note of it as well. So let's start module 2. We'll cover some kind of basic language constructs in this class. And in this module, basically will understand how the naming conventions in Java are followed and what are the data types we basically use in Java to store some kind of data, and how do we write comments. Yeah, please go ahead. I think someone raised his Gaso raised his hand, right?
Yeah, before go to module 2, I have one question from jar file.
Yeah,
So yeah, when we explain, we create for us a package to get for jar file. But for my
correct.
understood jar file, when
Actually,
after finished implementation and deploy get
Masresa, can you please mute yourself? Yeah, Gaso, please go ahead.
yeah, jar file for my understood. I'm not sure for Java, but another app is jar file. It is for after implementing and deploy, the root file is getting from that. But you explain only to create a package from the API. So I didn't get for the function of jar file.
Okay, yeah. Let me explain again. Yeah. So we create package for like modularizing your application. So you can have like you can like create 100 files in your project, right? So what you will basically do is like why we basically create a package is like some say suppose 10 files are related and those need to be in one folder. So when we say that these are some configurations file, we basically create a package like com.java.configuration. So all the configuration files you can like put in that particular package. So that is one package. So now you want to write some kind of like application files. So you can create another package com.java.application and put all the files there. Now you want to like create some kind of like uh, controller module files. I'll explain what controller module files are when we learn Spring Boot, but like these are basically modularizing your application files. So this is how we created a package. This is just about package. Now we have not gone any further in jar files until now. Package was just for like modularizing your application. All the related files and folders or subfolders will be in your package. Now, why we basically do create a jar file is like when we create a jar file, there's a pom.xml file or .gradle file. That is basically when we I'll explain about Gradle and pom.xml when we uh, study Spring Boot. But those pom and Gradle files will basically help you to create. Just a minute. Yeah. Those pom.xml and your Gradle files will basically help you to like package your entire packages, all the entire source code into a jar file. And sometimes there are like platforms like AWS or some Apache Tomcat where you can just take that jar file and you can like deploy that jar file. So once you write your code, you also need to like deploy it somewhere on some kind of like server where you want to like run your programs on that particular server. Suppose you have like created one project and you want to basically run that project on some kind of like server, some kind of like host, right? Like say www.myproject.com/ you want to give some kind of URL and you have like some kind of like server. So basically before that, whatever source code you have written, whatever classes you created, whatever files, folders, everything you have written, you basically need to like package it in the form of a .jar file or a .war file, and there are like other packaging mechanisms as well. So .jar file was basically one kind of like packaging mechanism. You take this .jar file, then there is something called as like Apache Tomcat server. So you can deploy your .jar file onto that Apache Tomcat server. Those will see later on, but this that .jar file which we created is now getting deployed into your Apache Tomcat server, such that like you can run your entire application on that Apache Tomcat server, and basically you can hit certain endpoints, hit certain URLs, and get your uh, output. So we'll cover these things in Spring Boot when we talk about like REST web endpoints. We want to create some kind of like URL which will basically take some kind of like input, some kind of payload from the user, and provide some kind of like output. Those things will cover in the later classes when we study Spring Boot. Let's not go into great detail because people here don't are not aware of like Spring Boot, and it will confuse others. But on a high level, this was about like .jar file. We can like use that .jar file basically for deployment onto some kind of like server to run your programs. I hope I'm clear, right?
Yeah, but so are we getting a jar file without creating a package, to export all the classes and the resources?
Yeah, that is fine. Even without creating a package, right? If you like just have a single folder and you keep all your files in that same folder, right? Even without creating like a number of packages, you can still create your jar file and deploy the programs and deploy your application. But basically, we should create modular packages such that your code is like easily readable. Your code can easily be maintained, even if in future you have like created your project and someone joins your team. If they see your packages, they see your the modules that you have created properly, so it will be basically like more readable, more maintainable to for the other developers as well. But if you don't create certain packages, if you don't create certain modules, it will be very difficult for you to like search a file, and if there are certain defects in your code, how to fix those things, it will be like very difficult. So creating packages is like quite essential in creating a code project.
Okay, thank you. Right.
Yeah, sure. Anyone else has any questions until now, or we'll move on with module 2? Okay, we'll go
Yeah,
ahead
one
with.
one thing. I mean, the Java only Java file using now. I mean, on when you do this one, only Java.
Sorry, can you
I
please?
mean, by this now is my IntelliJ right working, right? So
Yes.
out, yeah. So we have only Java. I mean, the jar file only you have it, right? At this time, you only jar file use it. I mean, the deployment and by GK. I mean,
N-
JDK is, yeah, now it's JDK, right? So now only you have our uh, file
uh,
or library user to only jar, right?
no, see, now
Mhm.
we have like created a single project, means a simple project, right? And
Yeah, that's
yeah, this project contains some files. If I want, I can like package it in jar file as well. I can
yes.
package it in war file as well. I'll tell you like what war files are, what there are like EAR files as well. Means we can like package it into some other form as well. Not only jar file, we can package it in war file as well. and then there are like .ear files as well. So there are like different packaging mechanisms. It's not only like we can like package in jar file only, but those packaging mechanisms and all I will teach you later. Now
Okay.
now these are like very early classes to teach like how the entire packaging mechanisms are. We'll get into those things in means later classes, but as of now you should basically understand how the basic, at least the terminologies,
Mhm.
these are like basic terminologies. That's why we covered this as of now. Fine.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Great.
Okay, so yeah, in this module 2 basically we'll cover some basic language constructs like naming conventions, data types, and when writing comments, operators, promotion and demotion rule for operators. Let's start one by one.
Sorry, Prita. You raised for WAR file. So, which files we need to send deployment method WAR file or jar file?
No, see, both the files can be deployed to this server, dot war file as well, dot jar file as well. So it depends like how, which means sometimes there will be some legacy project which you might be working on, and those need to be like deployed on some kind of different server. You might need to, as per your need, you might need to like deploy those legacy projects with some .war packaging. Sometimes if your project is like simple, straightforward, like Spring Boot project, you can go ahead with .jar packaging. So anything can be like used, like .jar files can also be deployed on your server. .war files can be also deployed to the server. So we'll see like what is your basic need, what kind of project you are creating. Is it a new project? Is it like built on latest stack? Is it like built on old stack, like legacy project? And then we'll like discuss what packaging mechanism is basically best for that particular project, and then we'll like package it using that mechanism, and then we'll deploy it onto the server. So that is the entire thought process. Basically, to answer your question, .jar, .var, both can be like deployed onto the server. Yeah, yeah, sure. So let's start with some naming conventions in Java. Yesterday we saw that we created a simple class, right? And the mechanism which we followed was, while writing the class name, we suppose our class name has like two words, like suppose say uh, employee service. Now this class name has like two words, right? One is employee, one is service. So the first letter of both the words will be capital and rest all will be small. So let me go to the editor. If you see this public class employee, right? So this is a single word class, and basically you can see that the first letter is capital and rest all the letters are small. Now, if this class was like uh, employee salary, suppose say employee salary, ignore those red errors now. I'm just showing you the naming convention as of now. So if you see this class name employee salary, basically you can see that what convention I followed was E is capital in employee word, and then S is capital in salary word. So you will always follow this convention while creating the classes. This is what Java has recommended, this naming convention for class. So that's clear, right? It's straightforward, nothing much in this naming convention for class. Now let's see how we basically what naming convention we follow for variables. So variables are basically like, sorry, yeah. So variables are basically used to store some kind of like data. Means when you use some kind of data type, it has to be associated with some variables. So by data type, I mean is like you might need to store some kind of like value. Suppose you want to store some kind of like integer value. By integer value, I mean that -1, 0, 1, 2, 10, 50. These are like integer values, right? And the data type which is used is basically int here. So if you see this line number 5 in my editor, int is a data type which is basically used to store integer data like whole numbers or natural numbers. And this a, what is this a? So a is basically some kind of like reference, or we can say this is a variable which has it's kind of like a name which is storing this particular value. So the data type is integer and the variable is a. And what's the naming convention of this variable? Suppose we had some kind of like integer, we want to create some kind of variable where we have two words like new value. Now, do you see the convention? Like we start, there are like two words in this variable name, right? New value. And the first word will be entirely in small, and the second word will have its first letter as capital. So this is the naming convention of variables. So again, if we have something like uh, some variable which has like three words, suppose new value stored. So if you can see this convention, the first word will be entirely in small. The first letter of the second word value will be in caps, rest will be small. The first letter of the third word will be in capital, rest will be small. I think you're able to follow this, right? There's nothing special in this. Is there anyone who is having any
Yeah,
confusion?
Macha, you're saying something? Yeah.
Anyone has any doubts about this?
Yeah, tell me you're saying something. Yeah. Yesterday movie, today. But
Hey, Vishwanath,
You can mute all us.
sorry.
All of us.
can you please mute yourself? Is there anyone who has not followed until now? This is straightforward. I think this is very clear, right? Okay,
Yes,
we'll
please.
we'll move ahead. So again, there are like method names. So method names are similar. This method names naming convention is like similar to variable names. If we create a new method, right? Suppose I'm like creating a new method. I will teach in great detail how we create methods and why we basically create methods. But for now, I'm just simply creating a simple method like public void print data. So ignore this public void as of now. The method name over here is like print data. So this is the method name. So if you can see, right, again, this has similar naming convention that as of the variable. The first word is entirely into small, and the second word has its first letter in the capital. Now, again, if we want to extend this method name, like if I want to have the method name as like print data in sorted order. So I'll write it like this, print data in sorted order. If you can see this, right? Now there are like multiple words in this method name. Print data in sorted order means the first word is entirely into smaller case, and all the rest of the words, if you can see, has their first letters in capital letters, right? So this is the naming convention which we follow for methods. This is straightforward, and this is like similar to the naming convention what we follow for variables. Sorry. Then there are like package names. I'll show you like what basically a package name is. So if you can see at line number 1 in this editor, there's a keyword package, and then there is a com.java.training.introduction, right? So package is basically a keyword which we use to uh, uh, basically use to create a package. Means if you create this kind of folder, right, using the steps which I showed, like if you go ahead, click on new, and then click on package, and provide some kind of like name, the package gets created, and automatically the editor will provide this kind of like statement in your file, like package com.java.training.introduction. So the naming convention of package is like we keep everything in small, like com.java.training.introduction, everything will be in small. So inside this com, this is like Java, then there is like training, then there is like introduction. Means there can be like multiple folders and and subfolders, like subdirectories within that particular folder. So this is how the naming convention of a package is. Everything will be in small, and we need to like provide dots if we basically go ahead with creating like subdirectories, means folder inside folder. So we'll provide dots, and like everything will be in small letters. Now there is another naming convention for constants. What basically is a constant? So sometime you might need certain variables which will basically contain some value which will never change, and you want to basically use those variables entire throughout your program. So basically when you create certain variables, you have to basically provide all the letters all the letters of that particular variable will be in caps. So let me create a constant value for you. So if you can see at line number 5 in my editor, I've created a variable public int max value equal to 150, and I don't want this max value to be changed at any point. So you can see that all the letters I've used in this particular variable are like in are in capital letters. So this is what we will follow while we create constants. If you have like multiple words in this, you can like append it with like an underscore, but all the letters of the constant of the variable holding a constant value will be in capital letters. So this was about the naming conventions of class, variables, method names, packages, and constant. So I think this was very straightforward, and these are like naming conventions which you should basically follow. This is for like good practice, and this makes your code readable and maintainable as well. Anyone has any questions? I think this was very straightforward, but still, if anyone has, just we can just go around once. Okay, we'll move ahead. So the next topic is like data type, and we have like various data types in Java for holding some of your values. Like data types are basically used to store values. Means the values can be like in different forms. Like sometimes it can be in decimal form, sometimes it can be like in integer form. Sometimes the values might be in Boolean form. Boolean form is basically like true or false. Sometimes you might need some variables to store some kind of variable, like which sometimes you want some true value or false value, which needs to be stored to some kind of like a data type. So that is called a Boolean. So basically, data types are categorized into two categories in Java. So one is primitive data type, other is user defined data types. So by primitive data types, basically, I mean that Java has its inbuilt primary data types. There are like 8 primary data types which are been already defined in Java. And these are basically primitive data types. And then we can like create our own data type as well in Java. So those are called user defined data types. So first we'll see like how we basically use primitive data types, the built-in data types of Java, which can be used to store different kind of like values. So those are primitive data types. So let's first go about this primitive data types. So this is the continuation of data types itself. So if you can see, there are like 8 data types. This is byte, this is short, then this is integer, this is long, then this is float, double, boolean, char. So let me explain like what basically each of these data type does. So this byte data type is basically byte, short, int, and long. The first 4 data types are basically used to store your whole numbers or integer numbers. Like these data types can store your numbers like -1, -2, 0, 1, 2, 3, these kind of numbers, and like 100, 200. These kind of like numbers will be basically stored using byte, short, int, and long. So what is the difference again in byte, short, int, and long? Means we are all using these data types to store whole numbers or integer numbers only. So why do we have like 4 data types? So it's because there is some kind of like storage range for each of the data type. Like means there's a storage range, right? Suppose someone has an iPhone which has like storage of like 128 GB. Someone has like another some phone, Samsung phone, which has like storage of like 256 GB. So there is some kind of like range which is there for each of your phones, right? You cannot exceed that range in your phone. So similar is like the concept of data types as well. So these data types has some kind of like storage capacity or storage range. You cannot exceed that storage range when you store some kind of value in that particular data type. So byte is basically like the smallest storage range, means it can store your values from this -2 raised to the power 7 to 2 raised to the power 7 minus 1. By 2 raised to the power 7, I mean it's like it's -128 to 127. I will show you this with an example. I've created one operators package. I will create a simple operator class and I will show you the demo here. See the naming convention I'm using for creating a class. Basic operator example. So if you see this naming convention, all the letters of the all the letters of each word, right, are in capital letters. always follow this convention. So I've created one basic class operator example. And for now, we will again create that main method, which we saw in the first, in the last class. So I just wrote main, and then there was some kind of like suggestion which was getting displayed. So I just hit enter, it created a method for me. You can like create a simple class and basically see if you're able to do these things or not. So for now, let me explain this. So I created like byte b equal to 10. So you can see that it is easily able to store this value, right? Byte b equal to 10, because it lies in the storage range of this particular data type. Now, if I use like 130, again, are you able to see this red underline, right? Anyone able to see this red underline on the editor?
Yes, I
Yes.
see.
Yeah. So this is basically your compiler or your editor is throwing an error. What it is throwing an error is basically means it is going out of range. So if you see the slide, right, this byte has a storage capacity of -2 raised to the power 7 to 2 raised to the power 7 minus 1. If you do this math, right, if you do this math, then what it basically means is like you can store numbers only from -128 to 127. Any number other than that, if you try to store in byte data type, it will throw an error. Now see, I'm storing 129, it's still giving me error. I'm storing 128, it's still giving me error. Now, when I store 127, it does not give me an error because it lies in that range, right? It lies in the range of -128 to 127. So it did not throw me an error. So again, next is like sort, right? Sort has like more range. It's like -2 raised to the power 15 to 2 raised to the power 15 minus 1. So let's take an example of sort. Sort C equal to. So this lies in the range. So basically this will not throw an error, right? So the range is basically like -2 raised to the power 15. So So this is the range of sort. So if you want to store any value which byte cannot store, right? Your byte data type cannot store any value. You can see if it can be but basically stored in sort data type. So sort data type has basically more range than byte. So if you want to like store 130, you can go for sort. It cannot be stored in byte data type, so we can basically go for sort. It's like using a higher range data type, means it has more storage capacity. Next is like integer long. So it is like int. This is like one of the most common data types, int, which you will be like using very often. Integer like value, I'm giving some kind of like variable name like value. I'm storing some kind of like value. So this is one of the most common data types which you will be using. Then there again, there is like long. So this is again, this long data type has more storage capacity than integer as well. So long new value. See the naming convention, what I am following in creating the variable new value. See, this was the naming convention we told, right? While creating a variable with having multiple words. The first word will be in entirely small letters, and the first letter of the next word will be in capital. So long has like it can cover a long value, means its range is quite more. So you can create something like this. And basically when you create a long variable, right, it's uh you have to like provide an L at the end. If you can see, right, after writing all these numbers, I just appended an L at the end. So this denotes that this is a long value. So long has higher storage capacity than int, sort, byte. Int has higher storage capacity than sort and byte. Sort has higher storage capacity than byte. So let's go to other data types. We have like other data types for storing values, like these are used for decimal storage of values, float and double. So float f equal to, say we want to store some kind of like decimal value 2.5, and you have to append an f at the end. So if you can see whatever decimal values we have written, we just need to like append an f at the end. This denotes this is a float value. This is used for like storing decimal values. And the precision of these decimal values is like 7 to 8 digits. Means basically after this decimal, you can store like 7 to 8 digits here. So that is the precision of this float. Again, we have like double storage value. This is also used for like storing decimal values. So this is an example of storing decimal values using double, and this has storage capacity more than float. So like in the above examples where we saw from line 5 to line 8, we were storing integer numbers or whole numbers, means there was no decimal provided at any numbers, right? So byte, sort, integer, and long are basically used for storing whole numbers or natural numbers or integers. So there was no involvement of any decimal after any of the values. Now float and double are basically used for store. Hello. Yeah, float and double are basically used to store decimal values, and double has more storage capacity than float. So whenever you feel that there is some value which cannot be like stored with the data type float, you can go ahead with double. Now there are like other data types like Boolean. Boolean, let me give a variable name like if true. You can only store two kind of values in this. Can someone please mute themselves? Yeah. So Boolean can only store two kind of values, that is like true and false. If you store any other value, this will provide you an error. You can like store true, you can store false. So these are the only two values which you can like store with help of Boolean. So there is another primitive data type, that is char. So char is basically used to store any character, a single character. Let me give an example. This is the variable name like ch, and if I want to like store some kind of like single character like a or some kind of another ch1, if I provide a caps lock, see if I provide two letters, right, in this particular variable, this will throw me an error because it's for a single unique character, means single character you can provide in this particular data type. If I have provided this AB, you can see this red underline error, right? Can you all see this at line number 16?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is throwing error. So char data type is basically used for storing only a single character. So you won't be using basically two characters when you want to use char. There are other data types which help you to basically store sequence of characters or like words, sentences. There is another data type which is basically string. We'll come to those things later. But these are like 8 data types which are like primitive data types. And these are basically used to store like this byte, sort, int and long are basically used to store integer values or integer values, whole numbers or natural numbers. Float and double will be basically used to store decimal values. Boolean will be used to basically store only two values, that is like true and false. And this char data type will be used to store a single unique character, a single character in any of the variables. So this is a simple example of basic primitive data types which are in Java. These are built-in data types in Java. So anyone has any questions on these data types?
So that means we don't call strings primitive data.
No, string is not a primitive data type. String is basically a class. String is not a primitive data type. If someone asks you, if someone asks you if is string a primitive data type, the answer is no. String is basically a class. We'll come to that later. How we basically create a string, how we basically append values, whatever is created in using class string. We'll come to that at later point of time. But as of now, these are the only 8 primitive data types which Java has. Is clear until now?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if you can see this in this slide, right? This is, if you can see 8-bit integer signed, 8-bit integer signed, signed, unsigned. What basically is this signed? So sometimes you might get some keywords like signed integer, unsigned integer. So what basically we mean by signed or unsigned is like, means you can have like a signed or unsigned with any of these data types. But what we basically use signed and unsigned for is like, signed will be used for like storing, any signed data type will be used for like storing both positive and negative values. But when we use unsigned data type, right? Unsigned data type will be only used to store 0 or any number greater than that, means non-negative numbers. So unsigned data type will only store non-negative data types, and signed data type can store positive as well as negative numbers or 0. So that is the only difference using like signed and unsigned. There are like certain bit manipulation things that happens, but I will not go into that in great detail now. For this class, I think this data type understanding like how byte, sort, int, long works, and why we basically use, how the storage range of each of them varies, and why we use byte, sort, int, long, float, double, boolean, char. Why, what is the objective of like each of the data types? I hope these things are like clear with these simple examples which I have shown, right? Anyone has any query can go ahead and ask the questions. If there are no further questions, I think we'll keep this class to this. We'll continue this module in further class, and Saturday's class, or means the next class will be cancelled. I have some travel plans, so Friday EST 9:30 p.m.'s class will be cancelled, and l- I'll let you know about the next class. Like, sorry, Thursday EST class, EST 9:30 p.m. class will be cancelled. I will let you know about Friday. Sorry, I'm getting a bit confused. We don't have any class on Thursday, right? Thursday EST. We have class on Friday EST 9:30.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so Friday EST 9:30 p.m. class will be cancelled. So about Saturday EST 9:30 p.m., right? I will let you know by today end of day.
You're canceling a lot of them. Is there a way to arrange it instead of drag? It looks like it's gonna be dragged if you keep
So,
canceling.
sorry?
You're canceling a lot of them, so we should create a way to
Yeah,
make
I'll
up for those
see.
and don't drag it.
No. Until 10th of December, right? I'm having some travel plans due to some family functions and those things. So after 10th December, we'll have like 4 classes as scheduled. But uh, I will apologize for that. But due to some family functions and all, I have to
No, that's
travel.
fine. The canceling is okay, but whenever you cancel it, it should be made up somewhere.
Yeah.
Made up
See,
somewhere.
yeah, see, it would be like you won't be losing any content. We will be covering all the contents in the next class. It's not like I would be skipping that day's class, but it's just like we would cover those particular sections in the next class. So if anyone wants, like, suppose today's class is cancelled, right? I can like cover that section. Suppose I cancel like Friday's class. If I like cover that 2 hours in the next class, means 2 + 2 in the next class, it will be like 4 hours. So it will be like it will be too much for you to get covered on that particular day, right? So that's why I'm not doing that way. So only till 10th of December, right? There would be some problems in scheduling of classes because of some family functions and all. I have to travel a bit, but after that, there won't be any issues. I'm stopping the recording for today if no one has any questions with today's class. I think today we covered only straightforward topics, and those were quite easily understandable. So one more thing, I am preparing that Google slide document, and I would need all of your email addresses such that I can like start sharing once those means in 2-3 days time I will start sharing those Google slides as well. So if you can all put write down your email addresses on that WhatsApp group, I will create one DL or I will start sharing those Google slides link with you all. Request all of you to please send your email addresses on that WhatsApp group.
Okay.